CFTO and all those others don't always give you the full picture. And I heard some very disturbing news today, too, actually. Apparently, Olivia Chow is being asked to resign by the police association, or something to that effect, because she got involved. Does that mean we're not supposed to get involved anymore? I don't know. Beware, beware. Stay tuned, you'll get more about that in a second.
In the beginning, there was Om. It is a measure of sound. It is a sound of unity. It is the inspiration for a 3-day outdoor music and art festival. Join us for the 3rd annual Om Summer Solstice Festival, June 16th, 17th, 18th in Tweed, Ontario, with 5 music stages and over 100 DJs. Tickets are $45 until June 9th, $50 until June 16th, and more at the door. At the Om Festival, you can see live performances by Andy Hughes from The Orb, Canada's own Dream Warriors, He's So High from Imperial Dub, and DJs like Mr. Rob, Mr. Nevok, and Jack Sprout from Nashville. Be prepared for rain or shine, for Om is a 3-day camping event. Bring your bathing suit, bring dancing shoes, and bring some food for the free community kitchen. For more information, please check out our website, www.omfestival.com, or you can call us 416-202-64OM, presented in part by CKLN. CKLN 88.1 FM and Anti-Racist Action present Armed Fleet, a night of kicking beats and anti-racist music movement. Add the reverb on Friday, June 23rd.
Come and shake your ass to sounds of DJ Chocolate, The Electrician, Tweak DJs Villa Straight Lane and Glitch, and Technomaster Kenny Glasgow.
Fluidics and the Womb Collective will provide all the right moves for their fusion of urban dance and martial arts. While special guest CKLN DJs will treat the party people to a mellow vibe, lounging upstairs in Holy Joe's.
Proceeds from this event go to ARA and CKLN 88.1 FM. Tickets are $8 advance, $10 at the door, available at Rotate This, Later Record, Eastern Block, and The Pit. Call 631-8835 for more info. Learn, educate, and act. Arm yourself.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Word of Mouth here on CKLN FM 88.1. As you may be aware, we've altered our regular format a little bit for this evening so that we can provide you with a little more in-depth and alternative coverage of yesterday's March on Queen's Park. Here in the studio we've got representatives of OCAP and the TDRC, and we'll be talking together about what happened and what's happening next. Claudia McCoy will be back next week with Creative Amnesty, and myself, Christiana Clemens, will be back next week with some news updates for you also. You can stay tuned for the last part of the hour, which will be, as usual, the people from Food for Chiapas with news on the indigenous people of Chiapas and their struggle against the Mexican government and military. All right, so without further ado, let's hear from Mike.
Yeah, it's me. I'm here. As you all probably read in the paper, we had a small picnic at Queen's Park yesterday. It's quite a nice afternoon. I think we got our message out. It certainly appears that way. I haven't heard if how far and wide this is on the front page, but I would expect nationally, if not internationally. there's a lot of people here tonight. My regular partner, Jeff, PJ, Graham, Frankie, and I'll give you right now to Barrett from TDRC, and he can maybe give your point of view of it. Not exactly an OCAP point of view, but your own from TDRC.
Well, the TDRC supported the action mainly because we had to have different expressions, and this is one expression. Sometimes people talk in terms of an equal response to a phenomena, and the phenomena we're talking about is the death and the injuries of homeless people. And I think what OCAP did was, and we did, was we recognized that, and that which shouldn't be difficult to recognize, that is that homeless people are people. So we acted like people. When we saw that people were dying en masse, and in fact, the number of people dying, it would take 10 years for the number of people to die that came to that demonstration. Number of homeless people that are dying. We'd have had, they say 1,000 people, there were more than 1,000 people. Let's say for 1,000 people to die at the present rate of death, it would be 10 years. And at what stage do we call it genocide? And what stage and what do we do when it is genocide?
Well, exactly. John Clark commented that this wasn't the start of any violence. It's happening on the streets every day. The homeless are being handcuffed and pepper sprayed in the face after they're handcuffed. Shanty towns or little areas where homeless set up tents are being actually poured with gasoline by the cops and burnt down. This was the violence that you saw. The police actually did start the violence. And I'd like to make one comment before I pass it on, is that we did a lot of the planning to surprise the police. Something that we didn't plan on was the Molotov cocktails and the paint bombs. Well, we didn't plan on it. I'd like to say to the people who did bring them, job well done.
Hear, hear, yeah. And I think this is just to follow up on what you had said earlier, that this is something that this sort of violence is being enacted against us every day. And there was a quote that I think was attributed to PJ, not to steal your quote, but that this is happening all the time. It's just today there were witnesses. People could see what they do to us on a regular basis. And what I've been hearing from people since has been sort of a message of encouragement and inspiration, in the sense that people are saying, this is finally, we're standing up against them. We're fighting. We're showing them that we're not going to be pushed around any longer. And that was really what, for me, was quite incredible about the events of yesterday, that we were able to go to Queen's Park and ask to put a delegation in. We had simply requested, and there's a lot of misinformation about this. It wasn't that John Clark tried to just go in there, or that we were sending John Clark in to speak on people's behalf. There was a delegation of 6 people to go in, and that request was denied. And the Globe and Mail today made a point of saying, without any sense of irony or recognizing what they were saying or how it reflects on the sort of democracy that we have, said, well, you know, it would be typical for a visiting head of state, would be the Queen to come in, but this just simply isn't granted to ordinary people. Then the follow-up wasn't, what's wrong with our system when ordinary people can't get in to actually address their legislature? And what do we do to change it? But there was none of that, of course. It was like, well, you shouldn't expect to have the same standing as the Queen. But
for what they want, because of the death.
yeah, well, that was the Christina Blizzard's thing. Was, well, you know, it's nice to give people things, but it costs too much, and you know, business might hurt or something, right? But what the message that's I've been hearing today, and seeing it in quite beautiful instances, like at the OCAP office, we showed up at the office this afternoon, and there was a bouquet of flowers left at the door, and it was left from a social justice group, and the card said, "Good on you for yesterday." And I think that's really what's for a lot of people important, is that we stood up, and for an hour we were able to stand against cops in armor and with horses that they were using brutally against us, trampling people. There were different, Christina Blizzard commended the cops on the horses for doing such a good job to ensure that no one was trampled or hurt. But I can tell you, being right up there and being jostled and stepped on by the horses myself, that I saw people bleeding and rolling on the ground under those horses' hooves. So they meant to do us damage. They meant to do us violence. And it's incredible for anyone to think that we're not going to stand and fight back. I mean, and it's precisely that this is the violence that is enacted against us every day, and yesterday we stood up. And we didn't stand up just for yesterday. We've said all along, OCAP has said all along, that this is the start of a real movement of resistance against the hateful, brutal policies of this government, and it is just one step along the way, and we are continuing to fight.
I'd like to actually ask Graham a question. Along with the unions and OCAP and TDRC, there was a fairly large contingent of psych survivors, people that you've come to know over the years and have worked with. Can you tell me their viewpoint of this whole thing, what you got out of them?
Okay, generally, also this is another issue which this government is currently involved in, and towards the end of April they introduced a bill they've nicknamed Brian's Law, which basically makes it much easier for them to lock up people on any pretext. So this will give the cops another major weapon in their campaign of intensive harassment, bringing people in this summer and well beyond. Plus, also it gives them the right to supervise people undergoing forced treatment at home with the prospect of being locked up if they don't comply with it. It's mainly forced drugging which is happening there. There were a number of psychiatric survivors there from Parkdale Activity and Recreation Center, from People Against Coercive Treatment, which I'm also a member of. And my sense is that, well, the thing is, you're talking very vulnerable people here, and there were some people yesterday who were, in fact, I guess they were unnerved and so on, but believe me, that was not being expressed as condemnation, or my sense is that people are distancing themselves. They were just expressing their own feelings honestly, and while they were saying they weren't comfortable engaging in the hand-to-hand or much more militant activity themselves, they nonetheless commended the courage and the strength of those people who did feel compelled to really take their anger to the extent they did. And my sentiments are very similar here, I have to say. I mean, like, this has been building up for years here with this government. They've probably taken us back 100 years in all respects, in terms of labor rights and in terms of housing and homelessness and all this stuff. And basically, at some point, it just has to boil over. I mean, like, people have to start resisting this agenda, and I mean, it's arriving at that point, and I think we really have to work to push this government out.
Yeah, I guess that was a good first step, I guess.
It was a very good start, and we have to carry the struggle forward.
Go ahead.
Well, I was there yesterday with everyone on the front lines, and the thing about yesterday is very important to understand, I guess, for me and as well, is that I was clubbed in the head and my chin hit the ground. But the thing is that the police expected us to be as sheep and just like disperse and get clubbed and beaten like we always get clubbed and beaten. And yesterday we fought back, and the look on horror of some of those bastards' faces was particularly nice for me, to see them run the other direction. And that's what it comes down to, that we fought and we stood up to them for over an hour. And they had the entire apparatus of state control against us, and we had spirit and we had strength. And today the Tories were even saying, well, you know, even these right-wingers were saying that we have never seen nothing like it. Damn right, because you're going to be seeing a lot more of it. And that's what it comes down to. That we're going to fight, and we're going to fight until there's nothing left to fight. That's all I got to say.
PJ. That's okay. It's not AJ, somebody else. I just wanted to start out, I guess, on what Frankie just said. It did seem that they did tear us apart in a lot of the media today, so everybody's asking us about the violence. So the two things I wanted to talk about was violence and about the whole word protest, because violence is poverty. Violence is, like everybody has said here tonight, violence is what happens on the street all the time, and violence is cops beating people up in alleys on Cherry Beach. Violence is the $3 million they put into targeted policing again this summer for 16 weeks. Violence is the squat that was burnt down under the bridge down at Lake Shore in Spadina. I knew a lot of kids that were staying in there, and I think people recognize that the people on the media who said that our cause was done no good and the message was lost obviously have never experienced the violence of poverty, or have never been that like stressed out by poverty. Obviously they just don't understand. And the tightness of the line that the police and the media that was against us, and Mike Harris, who was interviewed himself last night, they all said almost exactly the same thing. You could tell that was sort of coordinated, and it kind of exposed, because it was so I guess for a lot of them, I guess took them a bit by surprise or whatever. It kind of exposed not only their ignorance and not only their just complete lack of dedication to do research on find out what the conditions are on the street right now and what people are facing and how we might get around it, and to dodge the police instead of just clapping about the helicopters and clapping about the new toys that they get and their budget. Instead of doing the research, they said things like, well, you have the right to vote, you have the right to write your MP, and that's what democracy is. And obviously, it's not working, and it hasn't been working for 2 terms of this government's office. He's not even listening, to the extent that he wouldn't even listen to a delegation of 6 people. He's just completely arrogant about his disdain for poor folks. And so I actually heard one person last night on the media say, well, most of these people just lead quiet lives of desperation, as if that was the way it should be, and that you shouldn't stand up and speak out because that was being ungrateful. We should thank people like Gerard Kennedy, who has just slammed us, and he is our liberal MP in our region, and he just slammed us last night, and he was lauded as a hero for running the Daily Food Bank for many years, and that the homeless people would listen to him.
Believe me, he was paid for that.
Yeah. Well, obviously they just like
It shows how out of touch they are too. That they would trot someone out as Gerard Kennedy as someone that they thought could come out and address us and actually, we'd be happy to hear from Gerard. And so we just
friend of ours.
said that he would go and take care of things for us. That it might have quieted things down a little bit. It shows just completely how out of touch the media are and the governors are to think that this guy has any credibility.
We have about as much respect as him as we have for Sabucci or Al Palladini. All of them, they're all the same.
But the other thing is that I wanted to talk about, which is more of an uplifting thing, because we certainly don't get many opportunities like this. Thank you, CKLN, for inviting us here, because I don't want to talk about the responses to us and all the shitty things they've said about us in the last few days, but I'd like to talk about moving from protest to resistance and what the difference is. We don't even call ourselves protesters. We didn't go there to register our just like disdain in a polite way. It wasn't a media event, and that it's going to take real action in the future in order to do something about the situation. So it's a sort of a turning point for us. Like I want to put big shout outs to everybody who did go and stand with us, because we really got to see who our friends were in the last few days, and we really got to see who the poverty pimps are, who the people are that are really pimping off us and making a lot of money in nasty ways, underhanded, who profit from like workfare and who profit from the United Way's like advertising campaigns and all of this stuff, and then who stands with us and who is really truly down with the people out there and standing with us beside us, whether or not they were throwing stuff. There was a lot of people there who came out and showed their support, who broke bread with us beforehand and walked back and protected us at the end. And so I want to put big shout outs to all of those people. You know who you are. And that this truly, again, like I echo what others have said, that this is the beginning of a summer of resistance, and hopefully that resistance will carry on further to completely like run right over this government and just destroy this government, because it cannot continue. People have to, like Barrick said at the beginning, people have to stand up at some point. Like at what point do you say, okay, they're harassing people, they're targeting us as individuals, they're tapping our phones, they're, all this undercover stuff that's going on, and the helicopters in the sky, and all of this money flowing in. And at what point does just common people stand up and say, like, there's too much money going into police and not enough going into food and shelter?
Certainly something that's been questioned before, and there seems to be this agenda that keeps coming up every decade or so. The law and order, we've got to put our foot down and stop these kids from having fun at raves and taking drugs, and it's just everybody who's a little different has to be thrown in jail, and it's never worked before, and it's not going to work this time. You were there. Would you like to comment on your thoughts?
I guess my main comment would be that I was surprised not so much by the violence that occurred at Queen's Park, even by the violence that occurred once we were off Queen's Park property and onto the road and being pushed further and further, but by the fact that police seemed to chase protesters back to Allen Gardens and then pick off individuals for arrest who were at that point defenseless, tired, sunburned, helpless people without any recourse. And I was just shocked more by anything that I saw in the park, by the violence that I saw afterwards. And I don't know, I was wondering if anyone else had comments about that.
Yeah, well, I saw Don, Don, who is a much older man. He's in his 70s. I actually stood right beside him and watched.
I was pulling him up.
Oh, well, I watched as he was talking to a police officer, or saying something as the police officer is bringing down another person, and there's like 3 cops bringing down one person, and one looked over at Don, stood up, took his club and smacked him in the head. Of course, Don fell right over at that. Now, I talked to Don today, and he's fine.
I ran to go get him, and the cops started yelling at me,
Really?
back down, back down. And I'm like, he's an older man, let me help him up. And we're in the middle of the street. And the cop's just like yelling at me and waving his baton ready to whack me, saying, back down, back down. And I'm like, let me pick this guy up.
At that point, they got one of our members, Omid, who they beat up then. They took back to the jail, beat him up very badly in the jail. They had to take him to the hospital. He spent time in the hospital. Then he went back to another police station where he was released. Apparently, he's hurt, but he's in very good spirits. And yes. Okay, I just want to maybe let Barrick say something more, because Barrick's with TDRC, and something that is of interest to me. You guys get a little more respect from us. You get like to talk once in a while to people like Lastman, I think. I think there was one instance. Do you see any point in time when these politicians might listen through either what we did yesterday or through what you do with your vigils every time somebody dies?
Well, I think all of these actions actually have some meaning, because they're political acts, and they won't all be the same, as people aren't. But it's going to be necessary always to debate the question of upping the ante, because I don't think people have understood what is really at stake here. We'd like to talk a lot about democracy and those sorts of things, but they're actually talking about voting as to whether people can live or die. And that's where we would say, oh, are we going to vote whether black people can be in this area? Are we going to vote whether Jewish people can be in this area? And those things are not up for a vote. The reality is the attacks on homeless people here are deadly, as I said before, and we agree. And there'll be all kinds of actions to change people's minds. They'll only talk with us if we change their minds on the ground, meaning that there's a degree. Like someone once said, the only good politician is one with a look of fear in their eyes.
Okay, that's good. I like that one. Well, PJ, you seem to have quite a lot you want to say, so perhaps you should go on.
I'll try. I guess the earlier thing I just wanted to add when you were discussing what they did to Omid was that this has happened to us before, and I wanted to talk about Sammy and others, brothers and sisters who worked with us and are of color or are immigrants and refugees. There's a woman also who's being held over today who was Chilean, and she worked with Parkdale Legal Clinic, and they really expose the institutional racism of the police when they arrest people of color, because they are the most brutal, and they put the most put the most conditions. And like Omid was fine before he was arrested. I saw him like 2 minutes, like 3 minutes before, and he was fine. And then we saw him after, and they just 10 cops with batons, but swollen face, swollen back, like he's gonna have. He was beat. And they did this before to people, and they tell people in jail that John Clark makes $90,000 a year, which is a lie, and that we don't care about you, and they try to separate people. They actually had let several people go last night on conditions saying that they couldn't associate, non-association. They couldn't associate with anybody who's in OCAP. And all that kind of stuff it's just crap. Like, it just obviously shows that they're racist, they're sexist. They put. I was talking to another woman who was, strip searched and harassed on several occasions by officers at 14 Division, and that was an interesting thing too. That these officers were Toronto officers. They knew us. They said that. They said very clearly they know who we are. Well, we know who they are too, and that's part of what I guess we could talk about next, about what's happening this summer with targeted policing and so forth. But apparently the OPP had used excessive force in the past, so they weren't supposed to be there, but it was led by Toronto police on this particular occasion. I guess the RCMP also got leveled for excessive force at APEC or whatever. So you can level all sorts of charges, but the debate still goes on about what is and what is not excessive force. But yeah,
Okay, yeah, it's just on that particular note, actually, our station received a press
idea.
release today, which says that the association commends its members who were involved with the Queen's Park riot. which occurred on Thursday, and commends them for their tolerance and professionalism. The association is also demanding that the chief of police investigate the conduct of all those responsible for the riot, all the politicians who participated, and in particular Olivia Chow, who's a police services board member, but more importantly an advocate for youth in our city. And I was wondering if anyone else had comments on the tolerance and professionalism of yesterday's police force, and also on the proposed investigations and charges against Olivia Chow, who was one, and John Clark is another, and all the people that got arrested yesterday.
Well, like Olivia Chow's got a very big decision in front of her, I think. She was originally saying the police did use excessive force. She saw them attacking women and older people. And apparently today in the news she sort of backstepped a bit. Obviously here they're going to try to go after her. It seems that they've never wanted her around, and this seems to be how they're going to use it. She has to, this is her decision. Is she going to try to weasel her way out by saying, well, I didn't mean this and I didn't mean that, or is she going to fight them and, you know, come stand with us? We'll back her if she's going to fight, you know, if she's going to come out and say they were wrong, something has to be done. But we can't be doing anything with these fence-sitting liberal types.
I have a question for maybe Mike or Barrick. Do you know how Olivia Chow voted on approving targeted policing, the extra $2.9 million that they got for 16 weeks of cop overtime?
I do. Do you want to comment on it? Go ahead. Say it.
As far as I know, she voted for it.
Yeah, she did.
And I think that's the point, is that people are going to have to stand against this on all sorts of levels. You see, here's Olivia now being investigated by the same people. And I guess that's the way it is. That's what people have to understand. If they want to support this kind of thing, well then, you're next, and she's next. There's an old saying, if they can come for, if they can come, what is it? If they can come for me in the morning, they can come for you at night. Yeah. And now they've come for Olivia, just the next day. And now she's caught again, just by saying the slightest thing against cops. And we can't, no society can be run by cops. No one would ever be safe.
No, actually, I heard the former chief of police in New York City actually come out and say, I like cops. I work with cops all the time, but cops must be controlled. Without complete control, they're like a bunch of wild animals. And this is very true. Just to answer a little more your question about the voting, Jack and their whole reasoning behind it when questioned was, if we give them this money, they won't ask for this other money in this other place, which is a load. Anyway, that was the excuse. Anyway, you want to go on a bit, Jeff?
I just wanted to pick up on PJ's point that she was getting to earlier, and also follow on what you just said, that indeed that if we don't control the cops, we're looking at, you know, an escalation of the serious shit that they've laid on us for quite some time now. And indeed, we can't expect the control to come from the cops, which is the one they always try to sell us, that, oh, they can police themselves, they can take care of things, don't worry about it, we don't need. One of Fantino's big pushes right now is actually to decrease what little citizen involvement there is in review boards and actually try and make it a completely police-controlled thing. We can't expect it to come from the cops, certainly, but we also can't honestly expect it to come from middle-of-the-road reformist counselors and politicians who claim to speak on our behalf and haven't got a clue of what, you know, what we're actually experiencing.
Police, so of course they're going to be very cautious in how they speak about restraining the police, because basically these are privileged individuals whose status in society is being defended by these same cops, regardless of what the rhetoric in the media is. So,
and they say they're being investigated and they're nervous of it.
I mean, like, they're worried about being investigated. Wait until you're being hassled on the street when you got no place to live or something. No, or getting dragged off to Cherry Beach and getting the crap beaten out of you or something like that. And they're worried about possibly getting a bit of bad media. Well, I'm not terribly sympathetic, to be honest. I have to say that.
And I just want to say another thing that's really interesting, speaking about violence. And today in the newspaper, they had this one cop that was apparently hit in the head with a brick in his bed, and they were all crying about the violence. Whereas yesterday, when people had their heads cracked open, ambulances refused to come, specifically refused to come when they had 2 specific ambulances just for the police. I just have to say, whoever did throw that brick at the cop deserves a drink, and everyone that was there fighting yesterday deserves drinks.
Yeah, it is true. The ambulances refused to come in when they were called. I actually, along with three, right,
Riot gear too.
Exactly, and firemen. What I was going to say was 4 of us actually had to carry one woman from the park over to Women's College Hospital. She was unconscious. She's okay, but that's how we got people that really needed help over. And there's quite a few people in the waiting room at Women's College, and apparently a lot more went to Toronto General. So, we had quite a few. Our injuries were more serious, even though their numbers were higher. I think ours hurt more.
Does anyone know how many people were hurt yesterday?
No, I don't. I think that's a point that people out there should know about. There were a very, very large number of injuries. Some of them serious. There were a number of just looking at wounds here on someone's leg. It's just terrible, and others are not just bruised. There've been broken bones. They had a lot more weaponry, and they were using their weaponry, whereas most of the people who were in the protest actually were in a mode of resistance, but they weren't in a mode of forward drive, and didn't have the weapons. So many more people got hurt, and they're talking, and I guess they expected that they could hurt people and that nothing would happen in response, and of course there was response.
That's what they long expect, and that's precisely it. That for quite a long time now, they've expected that they can hurt us, and they go about hurting us, and they don't expect that there's going to be much of a resistance, and certainly not much of an organized sort of a coordinated fight back, which was important in terms of what happened yesterday. That fight back was there, and that they could see it, and it was clearly on their faces that they recognized that there wasn't sort of a new resistance forming, something that they weren't entirely expecting, despite their all their talk about having plans a month in advance. They were quite clearly taken by surprise.
Oh, without a doubt, they were taken. The deputy chief got on TV and said that we obviously knew what we were doing. We had equipment. We brought equipment with us to use against the police that they had never thought of. We didn't go in there willy-nilly and say, okay, when I say go, everybody attack. As a matter of fact, the whole thing about we wanted to get in and talk, and we knew that if we didn't, people would be angry. We also knew that those people probably wouldn't get in, and if they did get in, if we actually had broken through the lines and gotten into Queen's Park, the building, it would have been another story altogether, because once you're in there, they'll start using firearms and such. And we're certainly not ready, at this point anyway, to fight against that kind of stuff. I don't know if changing from protest to resistance is one thing, but then changing from resistance to revolution is, I guess, another. And, in countries like Colombia and Chile and Brazil, you've got to carry a gun with you. And, that's your only hope of living when you run into your opposition sometimes. We're not that bad here yet, but a few more governments like this and police getting their way a little bit more, and we could be.
One of the first chants that went up when people got to Queen's Park and were waiting and the delegation was getting ready to go forward was "Whose house? Our house." And that's not a particularly revolutionary slogan. I think that that's repeating all the bull that we're told right from grade 1 with our learning the words to the anthem and all this crap, is that that we have some sort of system that allows for everyone's voice, and that this is a public this is the public space, and that this is our space, and we as citizens own it, and the politicians just take up residence there for a while. But and that's all that people were asking, and we need to be very clear about that, because the media had in all of their excitement about what Marshall McLuhan would think about all this or whatever, seemed to forget that we went there with some very basic, reasonable, and I think clearly and simply stated demands, which we've mentioned time and again on the radio show, which were, one, to restore the cuts to social welfare, the 21.6% cuts that the Tories jumped off on right away in their mandate, to repeal the Tenant Attack, the Tenant Protection Act, so-called, which is an attack on tenants, which is leading to people being thrown out on the streets at an incredible rate, about 2,000ers. The eviction court, which even the outfits that review it have said is nothing but a turnstile, a drive-through window or something. I think they said a drive-through window for landlords. One of the lawyers that works there said this. And we asked for a repeal of the Safe Streets Act, which is an attack on people who are trying to survive.
Should talk a bit about what happened the day before. I don't know if you were all there. I can't remember now. We started the constitutional challenge against the Safe Streets Act. It will be coming up in September when all the tickets OCAP has got will come together, and there'll be everybody who's been charged under the Safe Streets Act to that date will be tried on that day with Peter Rosenthal. If we win, then every ticket they've written's out in the garbage, which is certainly what we're hoping for. Just perhaps like to talk a little bit about how our society, I see the front page, I think it was the National Post talking about protesters damage civil society or something. Well, it would seem that we're living in two very different worlds here, from the world up in the 905 area where everybody has their front lawn and swimming pools and the kids play soccer and it's nice. There's nice parks and all that. To the world downtown where people live in the streets. I met a couple of women, one 80 and one 58, that live in their car behind donut shops. The society's really becoming split in two. Perhaps you'd know a little more about, and maybe have seen a little more about that, Barrett.
Well, anybody in this area who doesn't see it just doesn't want to see it. And that's part of what's going on, which they're talking a lot about democracy, but in fact this is the learning curve, the new fancy word, the learning curve. Well, part of the learning curve is to learn that the person over there who's homeless, that's what can happen to you. So you better do it even for a selfish act. You better take this on because it hits all of us really hard. People more and more can't afford anything but their rent, and can't afford their rent, can't afford their food, and can't afford their kids. So our whole future is at stake here. So the protesters went and fought for the future. And we see that these cops have commended themselves. Well, I hope you are really proud of what you did at Sherburne and Gerrard when you jumped a young woman and put her down, and then put your knees in her face and kicked her in the face with your knees. And the rest of you stood around and you all saw it. 4 or 5 of you saw it. Not one of you stopped. Well, you must be commended. You must be very, very proud men.
For their tolerance and professionalism.
Oh, I understand. Yes, the words they're using, for their tolerance and their professionalism. I certainly hope they don't lose that, or we're in real trouble.
Okay, we only have a few minutes left, so I guess I'll pass the microphone for one last comment. I will say that there have been a lot of people arrested, a lot of people released, and we are expecting more charges after they watch their film bit by bit, as they say, frame by frame.
I'm just wondering if you have any numbers, because the reports in the media have been very conflicting, anywhere from like 12 to 30 sort of people.
Well, I was in the old City Hall court where there's 18 men. 11 apparently were released on their own recognizance. There's, I think some were released the night before on signing those, which I did once, a big mistake. And there's 3 that they're going to hold for sureties, which we were setting up. But we will expect that they'll come down with some political charges against some of our leaders, perhaps, or whatever.
So 3 with the women in court, right? That's on top.
No, that was, the women were up at College Park. I have no idea what was going on there. We had other people up there. Anyway, Jeff, one last comment.
I just wanted to say, in terms of what you were talking about in the emergence of dual society or whatever, and I think one of the things that strikes me is the way that we can look at every single day, it seems, in the paper reports that come out, this or that study has been done, showing that the gap between rich and poor is growing and growing and growing apace, that homelessness is up, all sorts of dire conditions that we're facing. And these things tend to get presented completely in a detached manner, in the sense that that's today's news, yesterday it didn't count, and tomorrow it won't matter. It's just, it's something that isn't part of, actually fundamentally a part of the system in which we live, the very social relationships, the very fabric in which of this sort of brutal system in which we live. These things aren't just, detached occurrences. They aren't things that are random and disconnected. They're actually fundamentally a part of the system in which we live. And it's that system itself that we've got to change. It's not strictly about changing this or that government or this or that policy, but we actually have to change social relationships. And I think something like the demonstration, the protest yesterday, is part of that too. And we talked about the different groups that were involved. A wide range of groups were involved, as much as the media try to dismiss it as one or two, people out there for whatever reasons. People are out there for very clear reasons. They know that things need to change, and they know that they need to change fundamentally.
I just want to say one last thing, that we'll fight on.
Okay, viva! We should let the Zapatistas come in next and talk about the situation in Chiapas and the larger struggles. But I also agree that we're going to continue to fight, and that this is moving from protest to resistance. So please join us. You know what side you're on. They actually described it, 2 armies clashed, and so join the People's Army. You might as well.
Yeah. Okay, so all you who like what we did and like to be involved with OCAP, our next meeting will be not this coming Monday, but the next one. So that's not this Monday, the following Monday at the Parkdale Library, 6 p.m. in the evening.
It's the 26th, I think.
I think it's somewhere around the 26th, if not the 26th itself, yes. So I don't think we're going to have a movie night this week. We haven't planned anything, but we will get back to that next week with some big plans, and we got to get out of here.
Yeah, could we just
See you
get the
next
numbers
week.
for
the
OCAP
numbers at
and for the
OCAP?
TDRC?
925-6939 if you're over in the Regent Park side of town. If you're in Parkdale, 530-1550. Barrick, TDRC.
Okay, that's Toronto Disaster Relief Committee, 599 TDRC.
Great. Thank you so much for all coming down here today.
There is one more number that might be. Have you a number for the Anarchy Free Space?
203-0191. That's the Anarchist Free Space.
Good night.
Take care.
The Ontario Coalition Against Poverty has been fighting for the rights of poor people through direct public action since 1989. OCAP seeks to unite unemployed, poor, and homeless people in struggle against the exploitation and oppression we face. OCAP is involved in fighting homelessness, workfare, and the continuing yuppification of our neighborhoods. We fight against the continued abuse of the homeless within the hostel system. We also fight against the racism and anti-poor immigration process. OCAP defends people individually who are being denied their rights, including being wrongfully denied FDA and welfare, facing eviction, not granted refugee status, and in a variety of other areas where poor people are getting screwed over. Meetings are Mondays every second week, 6 p.m. at Regent Park Community Centre, 203 Sackville Green, east of Parliament, south of Dundas. Childcare and TTC tokens are available. Call 925-6939 for more information, or come by the office at 249 Sherbourne. Also, listen to OCAP Radio Friday, 6:45 p.m. to 6:40 p.m. during Word of Mouth News on CKLN 88.1 FM. Ontario Coalition Against Poverty, whatever it takes.
The Toronto Women's Bookstore and this ain't the Rosedale Library proudly present Alison Bechdel live at UFC's Hart House Theatre at 7 Hart House Circle. Extra's very own Alison Bechdel will make her first ever Toronto appearance in celebration of her new book, Host Dykes to Watch Out For. Alison Bechdel's performance will include a witty, funny, and cutting-edge slideshow presentation followed by a Q&A session after writer Diane Flax